You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and in breaking news, the Brooklyn Nets have just changed the name of their team. We've been talking about the Redskins changing their name, the Indians changing their name. No, it's the Nets. They're changing their name to The Walking Dead. Bad joke, huh? I make myself laugh if I don't make anyone else laugh. No Brooklyn there. Just The Walking Dead. The city of walking. Nicknamed Dead. That'd actually be kind of cool. Team nicknamed Dead. Be interesting. Or the zombies. I wouldn't mind that. In all seriousness, though, how unlucky can you get if you're the Nets? Taurean Prince also testing positive for the coronavirus. Look, I'm not saying that Taurean Prince is some great player, because he's not. He had a disappointing year this year for the Nets. Was expected to be a really good stretch four, and he just wasn't. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. This year for the Nets, he averaged 12 points a game, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists, while shooting a career-worst 37.5% from the field and 34% from beyond the arc, the second worst percentage in his career. Not saying he's great, but with all these coronavirus cases surrounding the Nets, they need any regular they can get. Prince was probably their 4th best player. LeVert, Allen, Harris, Prince. I'm not saying that's good. No one was expecting the Nets to make a magical run, with Taurean Prince being their 4th best player. But the point is, the Nets really needed him, and now they don't have him. Look, I'm not going to say that the NBA should cancel the restart because of this, but I am going to say this, and I truly mean this from the bottom of my heart. The Nets should follow in FC Dallas's footsteps. If they will not be removed from the tournament by Commissioner Silver, then they need to say, as an organization, it's not worth it. They were going in with a skeleton crew as it was. They were going to give it their best shot. But now it's just a joke. I mean, there was a rumor that came out as I was editing yesterday's show that the Nets were interested in signing Amir Johnson. Nothing against Amir Johnson. Alright, he's had a good NBA career. Very similar to DeAndre Jordan, just not as efficient with the basketball and not as good defensively. But he's similar enough that it could have worked. But the thing is, when you're expecting Amir Johnson to play a meaningful role, especially when he's only started 24 games the past 3 seasons and hasn't played at all this year, that's not a good look. I mean, as it stands right now, the Nets would slide Justin Anderson down to backup 4, and Zanin Musa would be their backup 3. It would be Johnson Chioza, or Chioza Johnson, however you want to put it. LeVert Temple, Harris Musa, maybe you flip-flop Musa and Temple, whatever, it doesn't matter. Chioza should probably start over Johnson, but if the Nets really want to start Johnson, okay. Kurucs, Anderson, Allen, Amir Johnson. If that's the product you're putting out there in crunch time, in the stretch run where you need to win some games to get into the playoffs, just say we're not going to participate in this. Let everyone go back home and let everyone stay safe. No group workouts, no practices, nothing. Just staying at home, resting and recovering for next season. It's not worth it. Tell me what the benefit is for these guys going to Orlando and representing the Brooklyn Nets is. Seriously, what's the benefit? You can't. You can't tell me a benefit because there isn't one. And this has nothing to do with them not having a legitimate title hope going into the season, playing out the season, etc., etc. No. If a team like the Lakers had this many coronavirus cases, or the Clippers, or the Bucks, or the Rockets, I'd say the same thing. Just stay home. Withdraw from the restart. It has nothing to do with me wanting to punt this season away. That's not what I want to have happen. I was content for the Nets to go into Orlando and try their best before the Prince injury. But now, it's just not worth it. I mean, you're going to have 5 guys in Tyler Johnson, Amir Johnson, or whatever backup center they sign, Rodion Kurucs, Justin Anderson, and Zanin Musa, who didn't have a meaningful role on the Nets at all, and in some cases weren't on the team at all, now playing meaningful minutes. It doesn't work. That's not what crunch time basketball is supposed to be. It's not what playoff basketball is supposed to be. There still needs to be a level of integrity here. To the Brooklyn Nets, please, no one will begrudge you for sitting out. You've had 7 players test positive for the coronavirus, and you've had some opt out. It's not worth it. Do not jeopardize the safety of your remaining players, the coaches, the people at Disney, and the other team's players. Don't do it. It's not worth it. If Adam Silver isn't going to kick you out, you need to do it yourself. Alright, so I'm going to put the kibosh on the superfecta. I know that's what you're expecting to get because not a lot happened in the last 24 hours in sports. I'm not going to talk about Deshaun Jackson. We all know he's an idiot. I mean, there's not much more I can say. As of right now, he's still an Eagle. Let's see what happens next. I'll talk about that. But as of right now, there's nothing to talk about there. The guy's an idiot. Let's move on. I'm not going to do the superfecta. And the reason I'm not going to do it is because decades of dumbass decisions is taking a really long time. Longer than I thought. Maybe when we get into the second round and the rounds after that, I'll do the superfecta. but as of right now, it doesn't make sense. So, I'm going to do Decades of Dumbass Decisions, but I'm also going to tell you about another Baseball Hall of Famer that shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I think that's how I'm going to end up filling time. I think I'm going to take a break from this day in sports history and Mount Rushmores. Nothing to do with the controversy surrounding Mount Rushmore. It's just I want to give these new segments some run. So without further ado, it's time for Decades of Dumbass Decisions. We're on the 3-14 matchups, and we have the 2003 World Series going up against Munson's Death. The 2003 World Series, if you don't remember, was Yankees-Marlins. The Yankees have a crazy comeback in Game 7 of the 03 ALCS. Grady Little leaves Pedro Martinez in for too long. Aaron Boone hits an extra inning home run off Tim Wakefield to send the Yankees to the World Series. And everyone on Earth was picking the Yankees to win that World Series. It wasn't expected to be close. I mean, they were really just a two-man team. Ivan Rodriguez had one of the greatest playoffs that any player has ever had. And that's not limited to just one series. That's all three. He was in every big play in the NLDS against the Giants. In fact, he ended the World Series by hanging on to a throw from the outfield. I think it was JT Snow that tried to do his best Pete Rose impression, but it didn't work. Pudge held onto the ball, and he sent the Marlins to the NLCS. That NLCS against the Cubs, Steve Bartman in Game 6, the crazy comeback by the Marlins. Game 7, back and forth affair, but the Marlins pull away in the 7th inning. But they came really close to losing that series. They were down by 2, entering the top of the 5th. They could have lost Game 6 very easily. There are still Cubs fans out there that want Steve Bartman's head. In fact, I'll even go further back. Game 5. That's right, the Cubs blew a 3-1. The Cubs got shut out in Game 5. Josh Beckett continued his great postseason. Was great against the Giants. Great against the Cubs. He pitched a complete game shutout. And he'd continue it in the World Series en route to being named World Series MVP. Thinking back on it now, I still can't figure out how the Yankees lost that series. Jeff Conine was good too in the playoffs, now that I'm thinking about it. So, you had two great players in Irod and Beckett, and one good player in Conine. That was it. The Yankees still had their core four plus Bernie. They had signed Jason Giambi in 2002. Hideki Matsui came over from Japan. Jose Contreras came over from Cuba. Jeff Nelson came back in a trade with the Mariners. I mean, this was a really, really good Yankees team. And it was slated to be great. They should have won this World Series. But they didn't. Game 1, the Yankees can't get a clutch hit to save their lives. Game 4 goes into extra innings. Joe Torre has no choice but to go to Jeff Weaver and hope and pray that Weaver can do something. Weaver was good for one inning, but that was pretty much it. Game 5, Wells got hurt, so the Yankees had to go to Contreras. Contreras was overmatched. The Yankees couldn't hit Brad Penny. So you had two great players and two good players. I forgot that Penny started 2 games that series and was really good in those 2 games. Forgot about that. So, that's like a 4-man team. Not much better than the 0-1 Diamondbacks. And then Game 6, back at Yankee Stadium. I remember watching this with my father. We're just staring at each other like, is Josh Beckett really this good? Is Josh Beckett really going to do this? And he killed the Yankees. Complete game shutout, only gave up 5 hits. Andy Pettitte was good, no question about that. Just wasn't enough. And the Yankees lost to an inferior Marlins team. Thurman Munson, I feel like we all know this story. One of the best catchers throughout the 1970s, former captain of the Yankees. I mean, a great player. If he had continued on his trajectory, he would have been a borderline Hall of Famer. He had an MVP. He was a 7-time All-Star, 2-time World Series winner. I don't want to say definitively that he would have been a Hall of Famer, but I will say definitively that he would have been borderline. On August 2nd, 1979, Munson was attempting to land a plane. He was taking flying lessons. Something went wrong, and Munson crashed and instantly died. Bobby Mercer has an emotional game right after that, but it really set the Yankees back at the catcher position for a long time. They had guys like Rick Cerrone, Butch Weiniger, Matt Noakes was there for a couple years, Don Slaught was there for a little bit, Mike Stanley was there for a little bit, until finally Bob Watson pulls the trigger on a trade to bring Joe Girardi to the Yankees. And Girardi had some really, really good seasons with the Yankees. And it's nothing against guys like Cerrone and Weiniger. They weren't terrible players. But they just weren't Munson. It's a luxury when you can have a great offensive catcher. The Yankees had that luxury, and they lost it in an instant. As heartbreaking as that death was, I have to say that the 2003 World Series loss was worse. Look, you're noticing a trend here with the Yankees. It's not good to lose World Series if you're the Yankees. There's an expectation that you need to win every year. You need to win that last game of the season. If you don't, it's a failure. There is always that stigma over the team. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Moving over now to the Islanders, we have Alexei Yashin going up against Tommy Salo. Boy, Eric's going to kill me for this. Eric Fischetti, the guy who I did the Giants chat with in March. He loves Alexei Yashin. Yashin's actually his favorite Islander. And the reason he gives is he was the best player on the Islanders when I was getting into hockey. That's a fair reason to say that the guy's your favorite. I don't begrudge Eric for that at all. The one thing I'd say is, look at his tenure objectively. This guy was terrible. From the second he got to the Islanders, he was a bitter disappointment. He wasn't a bad player, but from what the Islanders gave up to get him all the way until he was bought out, The tenure was abysmal. Charles Wang had just bought the Islanders. Now, Wang, towards the end of his tenure as Islanders owner, was regarded as a miser. He didn't put a lot of money into the team, and that's correct. But when he first got there, he put a lot of money into the team. And there was no bigger investment than Yashin. This guy was a great Ottawa Senator and was slated to be there for a long time. I've alluded to this when I talked about Alexander Daigle. But it didn't work. Yashin was jealous of Daigle for getting the limelight. He held out multiple times. There was something with a art center in Canada where Yashin was supposed to give them a bunch of money, and the relationship soured. I mean, it got so bad that A, Yashin canceled that donation, and B, right after that, Yashin wanted a raise. The Senators wouldn't give it to him, so he sat out the entire season. Now, he came back the year after and played well. 88 points in 82 games. He had a 40-goal season. No one could doubt the talent that Yashin was, but he wasn't worth the headache. The Senators were desperate to get rid of him, and they found a willing sap in Milbury. Wang wanted to spend money. Milbury saw an unhappy star who wanted a big contract, and at the time, Yashin was a star. Not at the upper echelon of NHL players, but he was regarded as one of the best players in hockey. Again, point-a-game player. Milbury swings a trade for Yashin in which he gives up Bill Muckalt. Okay, not terrible. The second overall pick, and Zdeno Chara. Alright, you know what? Chara didn't spend a bunch of time with the Senators. Yeah, it's bad that you traded Chara for Yashin, but it's not terrible. Oh yeah, that second overall pick also became Jason Spezza. So the Islanders gifted the Senators two key parts of teams that would kill the Islanders later on in the playoffs. In 2003, the Islanders got destroyed by the Senators in the playoffs in 5 games. You can trace it all back to that trade. And Milbury doubled down on it by giving Yashin a 10-year extension worth $87.5 million. Wang was happy to write those checks. Milbury was happy to make that trade. Yashin was terrible with the Islanders. On the ice, he put up his points. Alright, fine. But he fell flat in big games. He was not the kind of guy you wanted to be the captain. Not the kind of guy who you wanted to give that type of contract to. It got so bad that the Islanders bought him out towards the end of that contract. So Yashin was paid $2.2 million over 8 years after he was bought out in June of 2007. And it's kind of funny. After that, there was a rumor that the Islanders were interested in bringing Yashin back. If that had happened, I think I would have switched teams. I think I would have become a Ranger fan. I really do. It didn't come to pass, thank God, but there was that rumor. not too many people remember that Tommy Salo came up with the Islanders. He was a 5th round pick and worked his way through the minor league system, and he earned his spot as starting goalie of the Islanders. And you know what? He played really well. In his 2 seasons as starting goalie, 96-97 and 97-98, Salo put up at least 20 wins, didn't have a GAA worse than 2.82, and didn't have a save percentage worse than .904. Salo had a good 2.5 years with the Islanders. Why didn't it last longer? Mike Milbury didn't like him. After his first year as Islander starting goalie, Salo went to an arbitration hearing with the Islanders. Milbury said things that were so vicious that Salo actually cried. After that, the relationship couldn't be salvaged. Milbury picked Roberto Luongo 4th overall in the 97 draft. It was clear that Salo wasn't long for the Islanders. Yeah, he spent 1.5 more seasons there and played really well, but he was traded to the Oilers for Mats Lindgren and an 8th rounder that was ultimately used to select Radek Martinek. Tommy Salo went on to have a really good career. Not a great one, but not a bad one. 2-time All-Star. Maybe if Milbury believed in Salo, the Islanders don't take Roberto Luongo. Which means they never make that terrible trade for Parrish and Kavasha. They would have kept Olli Jokinen. God only knows how history would have been different. As terrible as Salo was, or that whole situation was, I should say, Yashin is a million times worse, was expected to do great things for the Islanders, and the Islanders never made it out of the first round with him. In fact, in the Islanders 4 times in the playoffs, with Yashin on the roster, they only won 6 games. Doesn't get much worse than that. Moving over to the Jets, we have the 1986 divisional round versus Week 16 of 2011. The 86 divisional round featured the Jets going up against the Browns. And this was a great game. It went into double overtime. I mean, this is going to sound really cliche, but it's true. Back and forth affair. No one except for Al Toon played well for the Jets offensively in that game. Toon had 5 catches for 93 yards. Mickey Schuler was okay. Freeman McNeil was But the defense is where they stepped up. Marty Lyons had 2 sacks. Gastineau had a sack and a half. Russell Carter had a really good game. So did Jerry Holmes. Their secondary was great that year. Some very underrated players there with Holmes, Carter, Lester Lyles, and Harry Hamilton. They put together some good years there. Not saying they were great players or anything, but just that one year they were really, really good together. I'll fast forward to the 4th quarter of the game. The Jets are up 20-10. With about 4 minutes left to go in regulation, it's 2nd and 24. Bernie Kosar drops back, throws an incomplete pass. Mark Gastineau roughs Kozar. And one of the stupidest plays you'll ever see. Ticks me off just thinking about it. Kozar went on to lead the Browns down the field for a touchdown. They get the ball back. And Kozar engineers another drive that results in Mark Mosley kicking a game-tying 22-yard field goal with just 7 seconds left in regulation. No score in overtime, double overtime hits, and Mark Mosley is finally able to end the game. He kicks a 27-yard field goal to win the game for the Browns. A game that the Jets very easily could have won. The Jets could have even gone on to beat the Broncos, and we could have been looking at a Jets-Giants Super Bowl. Because the Broncos beat the Browns in the AFC title game that year, and then the Giants beat the Broncos in the Super Bowl. That could have been the Jets, and God only knows what would have happened. Week 16 of 2011. Oh my God, this makes my blood boil just thinking about it. It really, really does. The Jets are playing the Giants. They're rivals. I don't care what anyone says. The Jets and Giants are rivals. They need to win this game to keep their very slim playoff hopes alive. That is when Brian Schottenheimer devised one of the worst game plans you will ever see. He had Mark Sanchez throw the ball 59 times in one game. Look, Sanchez back then was a good quarterback, but he never should have attempted 59 passes. Give Sean Green and LaDainian Tomlinson the freaking ball! And Victor Cruz, freaking Cruz, a 99-yard touchdown. That stupid salsa dance. Oh my God. Oh, and this is the best part. The Jets pull within a touchdown late in the fourth quarter. So I'm thinking, okay, fine. They can come back. They can do this. Let's go. I'm in Disney at this time. Disney World, to be specific. I'm sitting on the monorail following the game. I see Chris Canty tackle Mark Sanchez in the end zone for a safety. It iced the game for the Giants. I was so furious, I wanted to throw my phone out of the monorail. My parents were trying to cheer me up. Jacob, you're at Disney, the happiest place on earth. No one was more ticked off in the entire resort than me. That is worse than the 86 AFC title game. Yes, it was a bad fourth quarter collapse. I understand that. But the totality of the game and the fact that it was against the Giants makes 2011 worse. Moving on now to the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets ones have been really hard so far, and it's going to get even harder tomorrow. I'm looking ahead. I know you're confused as to what the saga of centers is. Don't worry, I'll explain it tomorrow. We have the 2013 Eastern Conference quarterfinals going up against the Nets selling Kyle Korver. The 12-13 season was the Nets' first year in Brooklyn. And expectations were sky high. Darren Williams had re-signed. Joe Johnson had been traded for. Brook Lopez had come back from a season-ending injury to make an all-star team. Gerald Wallace had signed a big contract to stay with the Nets. There were high expectations for this team going into their first year in Brooklyn. Instead, it didn't really start out that way. Avery Johnson started the season 14-14. I was there on Christmas Day where they got blown out. It was terrible. He was canned not far after that, replaced by PJ Carlesimo. Carlesimo had him playing really well. Much better defensively. He went 35-19 as Nets head coach. And just as a quick aside, this has nothing to do with anything. After the Nets lost this series, I wanted Carlesimo back. I mean, I was happy to get Jason Kidd at the time, but I really didn't want them to interview anyone else. Hire PJ Carlesimo. Let's go. The Nets finished 49-33. They're the 4th seed going up against the Chicago Bulls. Without Derrick Rose, by the way. Rose had gotten hurt. Again. So, Kirk Heinrich and Nate Robinson were their starting point guards. Nate Robinson went on to kill the Nets. He was the Bulls' second leading scorer in that series. He averaged 17 points. I didn't like Nate Robinson before that because he was with the Knicks. And all my Knicks fans' friends were saying, "Oh, look at this guy, he's so cool, blah, blah, blah." I hated him because of that. I respect what he did as someone of his height succeeding in the NBA. Good for him. But I just never liked him. The turning point of that series, to me, was Game 4. A triple overtime game. Obviously, the Nets with a bunch of opportunities to win. But by the end of triple overtime, you could tell that these guys were gassed. Deron Williams played 58 minutes. Brook Lopez played 51. Reggie Evans played 50. Gerald Wallace, 48. Joe Johnson, 48. I mean, they were gassed. Nate Robinson, off the bench, scores 34. The high man in the game. Kirk Heinrich, double-double. Joakim Noah, 13 rebounds. Nice job, Reggie Evans. I mean, he got 13 rebounds too, but come on, just box out better than that. It was a really tough series, just because there were such sky-high expectations. They took me on this roller coaster ride as a fan, and they just fell flat. Selling Kyle Korver, we all know this story. The Nets picked Kyle Korver in the second round, but they sold him to the Sixers for cash that would be used to buy a fax machine that could also make copies, a summer league team, and I think they also repaved a parking lot. I am not kidding. That was what they used the money for. I swear to God, I think that's true. Kyle Korver is worse just because of what he became. One of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. You put him on those Nets teams with Kidd, RJ, and Carter, maybe they make a little more noise in the playoffs. Alright, it's time once again to go Baseball Hall of Faming. Yeah, I kind of like that. That's a good intro for this. The Hall of Famer that I want to tell you about is Jimmy Collins. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1945. So just as a quick aside, that means that everyone from 1939 to 1944 should have gotten in. That's how I'm doing this. That's the last I'm going to say on the subject. Also, I kind of like that thing of introducing the Hall of Famer. That's good, I like that. Collins played around the turn of the 19th century. He was a really good player. He won the 1903 World Series with the Boston Pilgrims. really good defensively, pioneering third baseman. I get all that, but I don't look at defense for the Hall of Fame. I said that to Tom Van Riper. I'll say it again. I think being great defensively, and that's what Collins was, great defensively, pioneered defensively, shouldn't get you into the Hall of Fame alone. You have to have more with the bat. And Collins didn't. He finished with less than 2,000 hits, not a lot of home runs, which is fine. You know, I understand that no one hit home runs back then, but it's the hits that really do it for me. That's not a Hall of Famer. Not a lot of bold type. Not a Hall of Famer. Also, in that 03 World Series, Collins did not play great. He only hit .250. Without getting too far into it, there were a bunch of players that played better than him. I understand that he was the player manager for the Pilgrims in that World Series. I understand what he did defensively. Alright, he's a Hall of Very Good type, but I can't put him in the Hall of Fame. I have no problem taking a metaphorical crowbar to his plaque. Alright, see what I said? I really don't need to do this day in sports history and give you another Mount Rushmore. I'm sorry if you're a Predators fan, or a Devils fan, or a Rangers fan. That's not why I'm doing this, to slight those teams. I just think it makes more sense to give the other segments some run and then go back to old reliables when I need to. I'm having fun doing decades of dumbass decisions. I'm having a lot of fun Hall of Faming. I hope you're having a lot of fun listening to it. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that there have only been two geniuses in this world, and they're both named William: Shakespeare and Mays.